Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a storm-swept July 20th presentation. The storms you experience are natural. They are not artificial, unless you're living in the virtual reality the rest of us like to hang out in. But if anything happens, there are storms here in Georgia, so that's probably what it is. But just hang tight, and we'll come back in with the stream as soon as we can. Our presenter tonight, Nathan Hanish, been a great friend of the IGDA for a long time. Been doing some great work, and very happy for him to call in for this one. He's done this presentation in Michigan, so we're getting the refined version of it. AI is clearly the thing right now. I've enjoyed being an AI designer for a couple decades now, but what I did and what we did in games is very different from the AI and LLMs that are upending our lives right now. If you're interested in this, the GGDA will be involved in more AI and LLM conversations at DragonCon over Labor Day. But I'm really, really looking forward to all the tips and especially the tools that Nathan's been trying out. So Nathan, do us a favor and take it away.
Hello, thanks everybody for showing up, either live or watching this later on the YouTubes. Let's get started.
Welcome to my presentation on AI tools for game development.
All right, so this video was sort of the segue into the presentation. I took some of the cover art for Galactic Civilizations 4 Supernova, which was just, still heads, drug it into Studio DID, and about 30 seconds later had a talking head that fit the art style and fit the lip syncing, and was frankly kind of blown away. So let's get going. All right, so let me put this up as a slideshow. So this is in fact version 2 of my presentation. I did a version for the Ann Arbor chapter a couple months ago, and of course had to revise at least a third of the slides since then. I'll be talking about it's 60-ish tools in 60-ish minutes. All right, so just real brief table of contents. We've got some background, some general tools, code tools, images, graphic design, 3D models, scene generation, animation, voice and music, socials and legal, artificial general intelligence, and then I hope to have some discussion with you all. All right, you guys already heard the shameless plug. GalCiv 4 Supernova is now on early access on Steam and Epic and coming out in full release pretty soon. As part of that, I got to work on this great feature called Alien GPT. We at Stardock are very interested in where AI is going, both from a game standpoint and from just all of the new LLMs and diffusion and all of the tools around that. So we built we've had a long-standing feature where you could make your own factions and share them with other players on the web, and have had a lot of success with that. You said, how can we bring AI, these new AI technologies into the game? So in this case, when you're making a new civilization, you can key in a short description, in this case, an international gang of game developers, and then we go off to an LLM and generate something like 60 different fields worth of text, whether it's conversation with other alien factions or a long description, which I will read briefly here. In the depths of space, a shadowy group lurks known only as the Codebreakers Collective. With their origins shrouded in secrecy, these game developers have banded together to take on the galaxy's most challenging puzzles. And it goes on. And, a lot of the text is frankly pretty good and certainly better than what most of our players were going to come up with, and a lot of times better than what our designers were going to come up with. And we've been just really pleased with how that's come out so far. And of course, the tools will continue to develop and the feature will continue to improve over time. All right, so I promise there's lots of pictures and audio, but there are going to be a few of these plain text slides. We've got to get a few terms out of the way just to get the audience acclimated with the terms that you're expected to know when you start diving in the modern world of AI. So tensors, that's basically your scalars, vectors, and matrices. Model or checkpoint is a condensed numerical representation of a tagged input data set. You can think of it as being like a super zip. And when you get a model, this is literally a file typically like an 8 GB file that you pull onto your computer or have on a cloud computer. Diffusion, you've heard of Stable Diffusion. Well, diffusion is a process of model-guided denoising to generate novel output such as imagery. And we'll talk more about Stable Diffusion in a bit. Latent space is a lower dimensional representation of data. GAN, or Generative Adversarial Network, you can think of as dueling neural networks, where you've got a generator of content and a discriminator that says, that's real or that's not real, with the goal of the generator making synthetic content that the discriminator believes is real. The idea has been around for a while. It was just really formalized in the last decade or so. NLP in this context is natural language processing. There have been some major breakthroughs in that area in the last year, really, which has allowed the natural language interfaces on some of these LLMs and other tools. LLM, I guess I should have done that one sooner, is a large language model, typically with billions, sometimes trillions of parameters. And cloud computing, of course, is other people's computers. A lot of these tools have cloud-based backends and web-based front ends. LoRa, or low rank, is basically a smaller set of matrices that are used to fine-tune a model. And if you're fine-tuning your imagery or you're fine-tuning your text, you're probably using a LoRa, which has the advantage of being a much smaller amount of data. It can be trained much faster than like the core language set. LangChain is a way to customize LLMs. So you can do things like, if a user is asking a question about role-playing rules, then go use this other model that's been trained on those role-playing rules. And there's some speculation that a lot of why ChatGPT works so well is that it has a lot of these custom models. It's not just one monolithic model. Chain of thought is a way of breaking down a problem into a series of intermediate reasoning steps, and it's also a way to get much better results out of an LLM. If you ask it, how did you get to that answer? Guidance is a thing that Microsoft is putting together where you can sort of interactively coach and prompt the LLM to get better results out of it. Python is, of course, a high-level interpreted language with just a bazillion libraries, and it really is the language people are using for AI and ML at this point. Conda is a way for encapsulating Python installations, which is great if you're going to be running several different models and you don't want the different versions of the libraries to fight with each other. CUDA is the NVIDIA version. Compute shaders are the graphics API version, and OpenCL is sort of the open version of a highly parallel computation language that runs on GPUs. Torch or PyTorch is a library for accessing CUDA and has tons of tools for math and generative AI. And there's a handful of other libraries you see all of the papers referring to: Xformers, transformers, diffusers, embeddings. There's a handful of sort of usual suspects. Speaking of usual suspects, there's a handful of companies that are very active in this space, and you'll see over and over again. Of course, OpenAI is the parent company for ChatGPT and DALL-E, and they're doing a lot of getting out there in front of the world. I saw a fascinating conversation between the CEO of OpenAI and the CEO of NVIDIA, where they basically admitted that they were all just as shocked as we are at just how well ChatGPT and some of these other tools are working. And of course, NVIDIA's trying to figure out how to sell as many GPUs as possible. You watch their keynotes now, and it's like, it's all about Omniverse and CUDA and AI, and I guess we do gaming too, but let me sell you some A100s. Hugging Face is an American machine learning company. Most of the open source models are hosted on Hugging Face's servers. So if you're diving in deep, you'll see them a lot. Stability AI, of course, the parent company for Stable Diffusion. We talked about NVIDIA. AMD is a rival of NVIDIA, and man, do they want NVIDIA's business. It's clear that that is AMD's number one strategic goal right now. If you watch their keynotes, it's all about, we've got AI hardware, we swear it's coming in a couple of months, just bear with us. Microsoft, with of course their Bing, has some has been integrating ChatGPT all over the place and wants to charge you for it. Meta, parent company of Facebook, is trying to use all of this technology to build Metaverse. And they released a lot of good open source technology, actually. Google, with their Bard tool, is playing catch up at this point. And of course, Adobe, with their Firefly, is just a fantastic AI suite of tools for imagery. All right, every AI paper you see follows this 9 or so steps. We had a big tag data set. We built an architectural diagram with a couple matrices at it. We did a bunch of tensor math and probability. We decreased the dimensionality, threw in neural system, trained it for 2 weeks on a 8 GPU high-end system, and oh my goodness, that actually worked. Please use this responsibly, and at the end, cool pictures. And I swear, I've read like 40 of these, and every one of them is the same in that regard. All right, general tools. If you haven't heard of ChatGPT yet, at this point, you're probably living under a rock, but it's pretty amazing, and it really is the category killer for LLMs right now. There's so many things you can do with this. You can use it as a coach. You can use it to help write narrative. You can use it to help write code. Actually, I will probably never write another Python script from scratch. Really, it's fantastic. And if you can get a hold of 4, it's even better than 3.5. There are a bunch of open source variants, none of which are quite as good, but some of which are pretty good. So one of the challenges with LLMs is, until recently, you could only run them on a GPU with a ton of VRAM. For training, you needed 40 gig of VRAM. For inference, you needed 8 or 16 gig of VRAM. There are some libraries, so ggml and GPT4all, where you can run LLMs on your CPU. They're super slow, but they do work. There are a couple good front ends where you can just load up the front end, type in the URL for the model, and 10 minutes later you're using the model. Ooga Booga is really fantastic. It's kind of got an automatic 1111 like web-based front end. Cobalt CPP is another good front end that's a little more tolerant of different model types. There's a Python LLM interface called OpenLLM. There's some great some models you can download. I had a lot of fun with Wizard Vicuna Uncensored. It still is a little bit censored, but it's far less ivory tower than any of the publicly accessible LLMs. Orca is pretty exciting. Where basically Microsoft has figured out how to train their LLM by asking GPT-4 questions and then why it came up with the reasoning for its answers. That will be released soon. LangChain, I mentioned that a little briefly, is a way to sort of chain different LLMs together and have submodels. And then there's this example down at the bottom I encourage you to take a look at, where somebody has taken a questionably obtained copy of the D&D 5 rule set and trained a model on that, so you can ask very specific rule-based questions and get very good answers back out of it. Super exciting for those of us who are deep into RPGs. All right, first class of tools is code and internal tools. Of course, ChatGPT. So I've been sitting down, and one of my projects I'm doing on the side is trying to take an old platformer called Below the Root and modernize it. And I sat down one day and was like, all right, I've got all this imagery. I really want to write some code to animate sprites and all that. And I wrote a list of things I wanted to get done. I figured, that's probably 3 weekends worth of work. Actually, my daughter and I sat down to do this. And I said, we're not going to write any code from scratch. For every single thing, we're going to ask ChatGPT first. In Python, using Cocos 2D, I want to get a sprite onto the screen. How do I do that? This was easily a 5x speed up over writing the code from scratch. And so, everything needed to be tweaked a little bit, but it got me very close very quickly. Of course, mentioning the similar projects, you've got Llama and Alpaca and Orca and Falcon and all sorts of libraries like that, or LLMs like that. Find.com I actually found to be even better for generating code. It natively understands a lot more programming languages and will also tell you where it got its information, which is super helpful. I also had pretty good luck with Wizard Coder, which is a variant of the Wizard LLM. I was able to get working Python code running Wizard Coder on my local, doing the inference on my local computer. And yes, I'm going to get past code. Copilot is really helpful. So this actually plugs into your existing projects if you're using Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio 2022. If you write well-structured code, it can save you a lot of time. It's not quite to the point yet where it understands large code bases, but for things like I define an enum, now I want a switch statement based on that enum, it'll do a lot of the boilerplate stuff pretty quick. And just for fun, AI Shader will write shaders for you using Unity. And it follows a model that a lot of these do, which is it's really just a front end on top of ChatGPT, and you have to bring your own ChatGPT key. But there are an awful lot of these tools that are basically just wrappers around ChatGPT. All right, 2D imagery, there's a lot of this. Stable Diffusion, of course, is one of the ones people talk about a lot. There are a huge number of variations of it. In this case, I ran an online front end for it. I said, isometric view, PC strategy game, orcs versus humans, steampunk aesthetic, and it came back with, a few images pretty quick. And obviously, none of them are directly usable, but if I'm, going through the ideation stage, it's super helpful. The other great thing is there are some great front ends for it. In particular, Automatic 1111 is a really good front end for just a bazillion plugins and fine tuning, and you can swap out the model you're using, and you can swap out different LoRa's. If you want to do anime art, there's a LoRa for that. I mentioned the Below the Root project I've been working on. So that was, the original game was like 500 screens, let's say 10 elements per screen, and it took me 5 tries to get a good result for each of those. So pretty quickly you get into I had to run 10,000 passes of Stable Diffusion, which on my own hardware just meant, let it sit for a week. Whereas if you're using some of these other tools, that means real money. So I'm a big fan. Obviously, it's not quite as easy to use as Midjourney, but you can get good results, and it's free. Midjourney has a Discord-based interface. It's reasonably priced, and you can get very good results out of it. This is a space hamster. That's one of our leaders in CalCiv. I thought he came out pretty good. DALL-E is OpenAI's variant, which they say, at 13 cents an image, you also get the copyright. The whole area of copyright and generative AI is wide open and going to be a subject of a lot of conversation involving people much better versed in the law than I am. So I'm just going to mention it in passing. Microsoft and Bing has come up with their own Bing image generation. I thought the results were pretty good. And you can, for the moment, it's free for $25 a day. It's based on DALL-E. We'll see where that goes. Of course, the granddaddy of all this, Adobe, since my last version of this presentation, actually released Firefly, and I've seen nothing but glowing reviews. I think there's some question as to whether or not they are licensing it for commercial work, but I will say the results I've seen have all been very, very good, and it's, of course, well integrated to their other tools and has fantastic front ends, and it's pretty exciting. And it's also a sign of the degree to which the big players in the industry are all in at this point. There are a lot of tools to help you out if you're using model-based image generation. I like this one, Prompt Builder. For those of us who didn't go to art school and don't know what Conde means, for instance, this is a nice way to visually drill down to a prompt set to get better results. I also found Camera Primer, which is a way to discuss how you can prompt to get the right camera angle. there are a lot of helper tools out there. This is just a few of them. You can train your own models or really fine tune. So one of my other projects is I'm putting together some animation and game design curricula for Scouts BSA, formerly Boy Scouts. And I really wanted to be able to make my own merit badge icons. So I found a copy of all of the merit badges and fed them in this case, to Scenario AI, and fine-tuned a lore on that all through a web interface. Took just a few minutes, and was able to generate a merit badge patch with cybernetic brain in the center. I'd say none of these are amazing for that, but they all look like merit badges, and pretty low effort. Image to image is one of the so a lot of what you do with Stable Diffusion and the other tools is text to image. There's also image to image. So in this case, I'm cheating a little bit. This is actually probably a dozen image to images where I collaged them together. But you can see where the sort of modern interpretation feels and looks like the original, but also looks, new and quasi photoreal. One of the problems there is, of course, it looks like a collage, and hopefully one of the ways to get out of that is through tools like Edify, NVIDIA's Edify tool, which this paper was actually about how during the denoising process, what this team discovered was different denoisers work better in different phases. And oh, by the way, they had this cool idea to mark parts of the image with names so that they could use different text-to-image prompts. This, however, has not been released, which is frustrating. So some people made an open source variant called Paint with Words, where you can color code. And basically, the white area you can mark up as being a cat or being a dog, etc. I wasn't thrilled with the results I got out of it. So I think this is still a watch this space. This one came out pretty recently, NVIDIA and Georgia Tech. Diff Collage, which I think is just fantastic. I've done plenty of stand on the beach and take a bunch of pictures and then, oh man, I can't get these things together to save my life. I just think these results look fantastic. If you're doing landscapes, that's just awesome. One of the challenges people have had with the image generation, of course, is I can't get the right pose, or my people have 8 fingers. ControlNet is one of many plugins for Stable Diffusion, and it helps with that. So for basically transferring poses, and it does more than that, of course. And just to give you a sense, this picture is a month old, and I'm sure wildly incomplete, but there are, 150 or more plugins for Stable Diffusion, each one adding a little bit more capability. It's a fast-moving space. It's very exciting. And this one also just released very recently. This kind of blew my mind. It's a variant on using a generative adversarial network where you can grab a feature of an image and adjust just that feature and the rest of the image accordingly. So grab the nose, and the tools understand that that's a nose. Just really phenomenal results. I don't know how much they've cherry-picked here, but the ones they've shown are pretty amazing. I almost cut this one just because it's not super exciting, but some of the earlier tools were for things like colorizing images. I actually thought this one was pretty expensive. 65 cents an image. I don't know that model's going to be... I don't know that they will have much success with this moving forward. In the process of going from 2D to 3D, there are some additional steps you have to take. So depth analysis is an important part of that process. Hugging Face has a depth model. I'm sure they have several depth models, but this is one of them. DPT depth. You also need to be able to segment your images. You need to know what's a headlight versus what's a tire versus what's a windshield. Meta, or Facebook's parent company, to their credit, has released Segment Anything, which is a really powerful tool for doing that. this one. So there's two different tools. Lava and ArtGPT-4 are very, very similar to each other. And so Lava is a large language and visual assistant. What's amazing about this is they figured out how to cross two models. They've crossed an image model with a text model, and you can do things like say, what's unusual about this image? And the model comes back with the unusual aspect of this image is a man ironing clothes on the back of a minivan or van. This is not a typical place to perform this activity, and it goes on and on. So, demonstrating real understanding of what's going on in the scene is frankly pretty amazing, and it's all open source under the Apache 2 license. Moving on into graphic design. Recraft.ai has a very, it's definitely running a version of Stable Diffusion under the hood, but you can tell it, I want vector art, and it will generate a vector art version, which you can then dump out as an SVG and bring up in Illustrator or bring up in Inkscape and then manipulate. And the results, a lot of the results are very good. There's currently a free web-based front end. We'll see where it goes when they commercialize it. High-K and Supabase Vector are similar tools. Recraft is the one I've had the best luck with. If you want to do some brand design, Luca can do that for you, and based upon a text prompt, and you can even get a brand kit. I wouldn't say I was blown away by the results, but they're decent. Brandmark.io is another tool that's like this. And certainly better than anything I was going to make for $100. Getting into UI design, Galileo is a way of going from text to Figma. I don't know if you have UI people, I have to imagine they've all moved to Figma at this point. It's really fantastic. If you haven't yet, you should. And then Anima app is another way of taking, I believe it is as a Figma front end, but then you can get, it'll generate, JavaScript code to associate with the different elements. I have not tried this, but it looks cool, and my UI people were pretty excited about it. This one hit in the last month or so. So, with QR codes, you just need dark and light areas. And now you can mix imagery, either image to image or text to image, and generate usable QR codes. So if you go and scan those pictures, they work. So I think that's super exciting. I kind of want to put something on a t-shirt now. And that's Hugging Face's QR code AI art generator. There's also Hovercode AI QR code generator, which behaves pretty similarly. Moving into 3D. So we have to introduce the concept of NeRFs, which are neural radiance fields. There are several tools from NVIDIA. NVIDIA is really leading a lot of this research that will take... so a NeRF is kind of like a point field, but more advanced. In any case, they've got their Mueller instant. There's also Turbo NeRF and NeRF Studio and Luma AI, Latent NeRF, and Prolific Dreamer. Luma AI you can actually run on your phone if you've got, I think it's iPhone 11 or higher. And literally like scan an object and now you've got a 3D representation of it, and you can render that in Unreal. And looks pretty slick. Building off of that, somebody else said, well, let's just take the segment anything and the diffusion code and start with a single image and then basically hallucinate that image rotating and then feed that in to something like the previous slide to get a 3D model. So that one is SA3D, or segment anything in 3D. NVIDIA's really made a splash with their Omniverse. Man, they want in the industrial space. They want digital doubles. They want to be simulating factory floors and leading that charge, leading all the technology charges. I don't know if anybody else studied BRDFs, the early research there, it all came out of automotive. It's a big market. In any case, Omniverse has Ganverse 3D, where they've trained a model on a bunch of cars, and now you can take a 2D image and generate a 3D model so long as it's a car. I want to touch briefly on Logarithmic, mostly to get at the idea of capturing appearance, where you've got diffuse maps, reflectance maps, normal maps, which lead to, when you mix with a physical-based rendering, lead to photoreal rendering. I wasn't actually able to find where they were using AI, but I did want to leave this slide in here because it's a good segue into Make It 3D, where in this case, they started with a single image and, again, sort of hallucinated turning that image around and then generated, in this case, a normal map and a diffuse map, which is then, of course, renderable in 3D. There are a bunch of these similar tools. There's Text to Nerf, Common Sense Machines, Avaturn.me, Magic123, and NVIDIA Neuralingo. I will say that I've been on the Common Sense Machines Discord and have been really kind of blown away by the results they're getting there. Some of these other tools are not quite there yet, but they're getting there fast. I think that we'll see, turn an image to a usable model pretty soon. Will it be a reasonable triangle count? I'm not sure. Dream Fusion is one of a class of text to 3D model. I don't think that any of these are very good yet, but there are a bunch of projects. There's OpenAI's Shape-E, Score Jacobian Chaining, NVIDIA Magic 3D, Fantasia 3D, Masterpiece X, and Michelangelo. I don't think this is, I wouldn't use these in a game at this point, but, need to be aware that it's happening. NVIDIA, another one of their many, many tools, is Get 3D, where they have trained some models on, in particular, chairs, quadrupeds, humans, cars, bicycles, and houses. And you can basically scroll through the eidetic space or scroll through the latent space to go between points. And I would say most of those results look pretty usable to me. All right, scene generation, real briefly. Another NVIDIA Omniverse tool for AI room generation, which seems to me that it's just placing 3D objects in a scene XML file. There's a similar tool based on diffusion from University of Michigan called Text to Room. I'm not sure if it's usable yet, but it's certainly, if you need to be generating game levels, there's something potentially pretty interesting going on here. Animation, Anything World. They claim to be able to generate automated rigging in 3D animation. Their webpage art looks really good, like the cover art here. I didn't find anything digging through their libraries that I would consider usable at this point, but I remain hopeful. One of the problems with Stable Diffusion is if you go from one image to another, you often, you move an arm and suddenly get a radically different image. The Temporal Kit and Deforum and Stable Animation SDK are all trying to solve that problem with some pretty decent looking results. And several of those are available as plugins to Stable Diffusion. One area I'm really excited about is motion transfer. Going back to my side project, I really want to be able to animate a bunch of sprites, but oh, by the way, I don't have any skill in animation. EBSynth is one project that's trying to solve that problem. It's free in beta. They haven't listed pricing yet, but that looks pretty good to me. Similar, Dream Pose, which is similar to Ganimator, where they took a model. Their model is based upon open source fashion database, where they're able to transfer animation, transfer motion onto a bunch of different fashion models and get pretty good results. Not perfect, like if you watch the hands real close, they'll do things like fade into the clothes. But again, if you're doing a sprite-based game, that may be good enough. I have tried to get this one to work and I have not been successful yet. Studio DID has a really fantastic tool. It's where basically you start with an image, you give it a script, like a text script, and 20 seconds later you have a video where your image is now saying the things in the script and lip synced to it, and like it'll even do things like fill in teeth and tongue. It's pretty good. There are some similar tools, Synthesia, Movio, and Lalamu. There are also some open variants, so Wave to Lip, I have experimented with and got pretty good results. They are in the process of making, Wave to Lip, low resolution, you can just download and try out. They have a commercial version that they would very much like to license to you. That works pretty good for human and near human. It does not work very well for not at all human. Similar to that is thin plate spline motion model for image animation, which I got halfway decent results running locally. But I think about this for a minute. You start with just a picture of a head and a video of another head that started in the same pose, and you can get that talking head to say anything for a few seconds of work. I'm both fascinated and horrified by this. One of my great fears, and I think this is probably shared by many, is that we're going to be facing just an unbelievable level of disinformation in the next few years because it's so easy to do this. All right, moving on. Conversational AIs. So these will, apply reasoning and speech to text and text to speech and animate a face. Convey AI is what I'm showing here. Similar tools, NVIDIA's ACE and Cognitive Code's Sylvia. I had the opportunity to work with Sylvia back in the late aughts, and it was pretty impressive then, and I imagine it's quite a bit better now. Wonder Dynamics has put together some great marketing videos where they claim to be able to swap the human in your video out for a 3D model that's animated and lip synced. I'm not convinced this works yet, but we'll see. Pretty reasonably expensive, $100 a month, billed annually, so $1,200 a year, gets you 2 hours worth of video. If you have the right project, it's worth it. Move.ai is a way of taking video and extracting motion from it that could be then applied to a model. Similarly, Deep Motion will extract poses essentially from pictures of video. Audio to facial animation. Here's NVIDIA again with Omniverse Audio to Face. The results are pretty impressive. They also have audio to gesture, which, I'm not convinced, but if you've got to fill in a lot of extras or background people, maybe it's worth trying out. And of course, text to motion. This was a clever idea where this team basically treated human motion as a foreign language and then used an LLM and came up with Motion GPT. And the results are, for, again, text to motion, are pretty good. I'm eager to actually dig into that one. And it's open source, MIT license. Of course, MetaHuman Animator is pretty amazing. So I think I'm going to try to bring this one up in the YouTubes.
Rolling. Action.
I need performance capture to work like a mirror. I need it to capture whether I'm acting scared or angry, but also subtle emotions. But sometimes all I need is
so pretty impressive. Meta's Make a Video. I don't think it's ready to be used by anybody, but the fact that it even exists for text to video is kind of amazing. All right, moving on to voice. There are a bunch of these text to speech that you mix in some AI technology. This I'm going to show Valley. There's also Murph, Speechify, Lovo, Respeecher, and Riva. I thought the results from all of those were pretty similar.
Instead of shoes, the old man wore boots with turnover tops, and his blue coat had wide cuffs of gold braid. Instead of shoes.
So if you listen real close, you can hear some artifacting, but the quality is generally pretty good. Altered. So this one takes speech and translates it to a different voice, and it will follow sort of the larger scale changes in speed or intensity. So I'll play a few seconds of this one.
The good news is that we've got enough fuel to make it there and back. If we slingshot around this moon here when it reaches the edge of our orbit.
The bad news is we don't have enough oxygen. So either we jettison half the crew.
So I would say if you've got a pretty good voice actor to begin with, you could then turn that voice actor into several voice actors pretty credibly. And, the price is pretty sane for that. $50 to $150 a month, billed annually. And of course, the best one here for text-to-speech is by far 11 Multilingual or 11 Labs. There are some similar ones, Tacotron, UberDuck, and Bark, but 11 Labs is really the best. And so we're going to play that.
Willkommen zu meiner Präsentation über KI-Werkzeuge für die Spieleentwicklung. Willkommen.
So it'll talk several different languages, and I've played longer clips where it's credible. It's almost as good as a human. I believe that you could ship a game using 11 Labs. Music. So this one's fun. Splitter, which is based on the Splitter open source project, is a tool for extracting parts of an audio stream. So let's say you've already got a mixed track. You can pull the voice and the drums and the bass and out of it. So we'll play a few seconds of this. Oh, come on. Guess we're going to watch an ad first. So there's the mixed audio.
I can't define what it's love that I lead. Oh, my soul will have to.
So for extracting voice from pre-mixed audio, it's pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's very good. Music generation. There are several of these tools, so I'm going to demonstrate SoundDraw, but there's also Soundful, Boomy, Beat Oven, and Iva, and Infinite Album. Iva is the best, other than SoundDraw. So let's go to SoundDraw. All right, so that was generated from some prompts and just a little bit of tweaking. Like you see this chart here where, we wanted this part to be high energy, this part to be medium energy, this part to be low energy. I would say usable as background and very reasonably priced. Iva was able to do symphonic music that I thought was pretty good. Some of the others I did not think were as good. Music LM, which has been released pretty recently, where it's text to audio, and this will generate a few 30-second clips. I will play those, but I just want to put a brief comment here that I had put together a D&D one-off for my daughter and her friends, and it's like, all right, we're in the streets of Neverwinter. I just need an audio accent. Fed in the description that ChatGPT had made, and got something that was, good enough for an accent. Probably not good enough for a shipping game, but, good enough for some teenagers. There are similar tools, Roland's Amadeus, and I thought there was another one here. Oh, Music Gen, Facebook's Music Gen. Yeah, so I'm going to play this example. So again, nice, pleasant accent. One thing that I discovered was if you continue to make a lot of, the particular tool will generate a lot of content that sounds very similar to other content generated by that tool. Synthesizer V, this is pretty amazing. At a phoneme level, you can generate voice within your DAW, a digital audio workstation. So, be it Ableton or FL Studio or Pro Tools or whatever it is that you're using. And I'll play an example of this. And it's very reasonably priced. It's like $150 for the package. Nope, go back. Nope. Play the thing. And I guess we're watching an ad.
Own the elements. Quattro.
And go.
想要传送从简讯给你，我好想好想你，想要你看到通电话给你，我好想好想你，每天起床的第一件事情。
So yeah, I think that's pretty good. Of course, I may be missing, challenges because I'm listening and I'm an English speaker. Narrative generation. There are a handful of these popping up. There is Mythmaker, Versed, Charisma, AI Dungeon, Voyage, Roleplay Rev, and Hidden Door. All variations on the theme of use an LLM to generate some narrative, use a diffusion model to generate some imagery. I'll say that I did a one-off D&D adventure and mostly used ChatGPT for the narrative and description text and got really good results. So, again, watch this space. These are not quite mature, but they're getting there fast. Legal and socials. So Spellbook claims to be able to help you write contracts. There have definitely been some headlines around lawyers doing things like quoting trials that didn't really happen. So, as with many of these tools, it's a good starting place. I would still probably run my contract by a real lawyer. Jasper.ai. There are several of these tools that will help you generate blog posts and copy generally. I've not dug into it, but it'll generate a lot of text for $80 a month. Towards AGI, so there's this notion of, some people are concerned that we are already at AGI. I would say we are definitely not, but you can use LLMs to sort of recursively go out and find information, refine a task, and there's a bunch of projects in this vein: Agent GPT, Baby AGI, Auto GPT, Agency, and Supercoder. I would say none of them are quite ready for prime time, but they're all a pretty good start. And now I'm going to open up to questions and discussion. Well, see, that was only 50 minutes.
No, that was great. Good, lot of good points and comments in the chat as you saw flying by. I'll start it off with, frankly, I don't think that animation is particularly good in any of the AI tools I've seen yet, both publicly and behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly one of the areas any game dev working in 3D would love to have. Even the folks who do the rendering would love to have AI do the rendering for them so they can do the cool things. What are the other areas you're seeing that we don't have AI really doing well yet for game dev?
So, obviously I spend most of my time thinking about code. The generation tools are great for I need a throwaway Python script. Yeah, I need to compare these two CSV files and do some stuff I would used to do in Excel. ChatGPT now generates that code considerably faster than I do. But we're not generating large amounts of code. We're not even really generating more than about half a page of code that is functional yet. So I'm dying to. One of the things about Stardock is we have a lot of code bases, and 30 years worth of code.
Right.
I'm dying to fine tune a model on the entirety of some of our code bases, and do things like, we went from Visual Studio's compiler to also using Clang. Clang generates 100 times as many warnings. I really want a tool that's going to look at the debug or look at the compiler output and fix each of those warnings. Because most of them are trivial things. It's like, I needed to typecast, for instance. Stuff that I wouldn't even want to waste an associate dev's time on. I think we're close to the code generators doing, but not quite there yet. And honestly, a lot of these tools are at the stage of they're good for ideation. They're not good enough to ship.
Right.
So I was asked in my last presentation, like, composers, are you going to replace composers? I'm like, no, but one of the big problems, and I've run into this in every studio I've worked at, is, you have a creative director or designer who's got something in their head, be it visually or text or music or audio background, whatever it is, they don't quite know how to express well, and you end up burning a lot of time at the front end of a project, sort of getting to what is the look we really want? What is the sound we really want? And I see these tools as really helping to bridge that gap. Get to the right idea faster and throw out the wrong ideas. One thing I had a lot of success, again, on the D&D adventure was I wanted some ideas for low-level adventures. So I just had ChatGPT generate five level 1 ideas, and then 5 more, and then 5 more. So I got 50 of them, and I was able to say, all right, these are the 5 I actually like. So there's sort of you need to generate a lot of variable level quality in order to get the handful of things that are really good. I see these tools as accelerating that process.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is shipping any of this stuff really would feel pretty poor compared to what even an entry-level game dev could actually do. But I can think of so many meetings where I've been where a dev says, I want the music that sounds like this mixed with that. The audio guy or lady goes away with their own idea what that means, comes back with something, and yeah, it's that, but it is absolutely not what the the person who gave the order had in mind.
And you burn months that way.
Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I've definitely been on games where that's been an issue. Taz Leet in chat was talking about something called AI Command, is the Git repo where Unity dev that built a plugin that allowed you to type in what you wanted to do and then would have Unity build it. So I haven't looked at that. If you get a chance to look at that, I'd be curious about your feedback. AI Command.
Yeah, so one thing I've been doing is I signed up to, a dozen newsletters and 20 Facebook groups, and every day I look through every one of them, and I say, oh, these 2 things look interesting. I put those on a queue, and on the weekend I go through and actually research the things in the queue and maybe actually try to run them. So I will add that to the queue.
All right. Yay, giving you more work. Mike Garcia was talking about the growing AI free movement. We're not going to get much into the ethics side of that because I really want a roundtable with lawyers and others, and we'll be doing that at Dragon Con. Mm-hmm. But it does bring up the point. There is stuff we have been automating in games for a long time. And one way to think of these AI tools is it's just a new way to automate a lot of the tasks we have. And I've seen this whole discussion of having the AI-free content. I'm a crafter, and I've made this. I did not use ChatGPT or other AI tools. But there are plenty of other automations that we did. So I've been wondering if anybody's actually coming with a good definition for what that means. Have you seen anyone push that yet?
I have not. Certainly, there is reluctance on the part of some parties to not be seen using AI tools. I think that that's foolhardy personally, because they are so useful and useful in a lot of internally facing ways. So as I said, the ideation, the script writing, there's a ton of things you can use the tools for that aren't necessarily what ends up on the user's disk. So I'd say, just throwing it all out, I think that those studios will not be able to compete in a couple of years.
And we've been automating a lot of the process all along. So
right, yeah, a huge. I see game development as like building the Suez Canal, right? It's a task about moving dirt. What are the things that are taking your time? Make those things faster. Use whatever automation you can to get there. Like, if I've got a tool that I can do keyframes and it will in between for me, great. Like, that's going to save a ton of time, and I can use those scarce resources where they will, yield a result that's more meaningful to the user.
Excellent. Sean Shepard in chat was especially impressed by the motion generator where they looked at human motion as a foreign language, raising the point that we often are trying to get AI to act like a human, think like a human, but we're better off trying to have it think like AI and make our lives better as a result. By having it analyze movement as a language is a perfect thing to have a computer do that a human really can't do.
Right.
So really looking forward to things that do that with music, obviously animation, and so forth. So anyone out there, just a comment from in the chat. Let's see what kind of, we really are at the baseline with these AI tools. It's just starting out. I'll be fascinated when people start really looking at them in different ways and taking them in new directions to make even cooler new tools.
One thing that I definitely see happening in the next, let's say, 12 to 18 months is as more people wade in and start digging through the papers and running the tools themselves, the pretty obvious realization is, oh, I need to train my own models, or I need to fine-tune my own models on my own hardware. Then you get through well, now you got to acquire the hardware, you got to program the hardware and obtain the models. And I expect a lot, and this isn't just games, this is sort of, across all industries. If I'm Ford, let's say, really where I want to go is I don't want to be using ChatGPT. I want to be taking, every technical manual that's ever been written at the company and feeding it into a custom LLM so that my techs can have a conversation with the manuals and get to the information they need faster. So one of the things that I didn't really get into this, but the synthesis of information, I don't mean like creation, but blending together of huge amounts of information in a human readable way is one of the things that LLMs are just phenomenal at. Another thing I didn't really touch on in the presentation, but I should, is because the LLMs are native speakers, essentially in whatever language they're trained on, they're also really phenomenal at translation. So there have been a lot of cases where we're actually seeing as good as or better translation into multiple languages from the LLMs than we're seeing from people we might contract with.
Yeah, I can imagine that, having dealt with human translators, especially when they're going with specific subject matter like technical subjects or programming.
Mm-hmm.
The LLM just has a much bigger database to pull from than any human translator does for that.
Yes, and I will say I have certainly at times seen questionable results come back from translators. I don't want to say which projects or which studios, but being able to take all the text, put it in another language, and then put it back into English to check it is really pretty powerful.
Nice. Sean Shepard has a question on a few people's minds. Does Nathan do AI consulting?
I have not yet. I'm certainly open to the idea. I don't know how qualified I am in that, other than I've spent a little more. I'm 3 months ahead, but I fully expect everybody else to catch up. So I guess I'm open to the idea, but I have not formalized that.
All right. And Sean, if you do want to get in touch with them, the GGDA can get you in touch with him. We've had him at Siege in the past, and he's very active in IGDA. And obviously, Stardock's doing cool stuff.
We are, in fact, shipping product, which I think is puts us a little bit ahead.
That's an amazing accomplishment in itself, as all of us in game dev know.
Yeah, just shipping.
We're at 8 o'clock, so I'm going to end it with Mike Garcia's question, because I don't actually expect Nathan to answer this one. What are the IP laws surrounding AI created material? I don't know if anyone, any country, any location that has created a law specifically around AI yet. They are applying the existing IP law.
Yeah, and our copyright laws are optimistically 25 years old. Like the newest ones. The law is not ready for this. Things are going to play out socially and eventually make it into law. But if you want to take the attitude of sitting around and waiting until it's all figured out, then you're going to be 5 years, 10 years behind.
On the other hand, I would not ship with a lot of this stuff. And it's not just because of laws. It is, again, because of the quality. I think Nathan hit it on the nose. This is your starting point. Make something better with it. And
yes, I can put in something slightly better than gray boxes now.
Well, actually, that does raise one other question that I have. What format are those 3D models coming from the 3D generation programs?
There are definitely some of them coming out as nerfs. I have not dug deep enough into the actual outputs to be able to give you a credible answer there.
Okay.
I have seen references to physics.
All right.
I did run a diffusion-based 3D model generator, which was not good. That generated physics. So one of the reasons that I included all of the links for all of these things is, like, if you want to dig into 3D model generation, like, go follow those links. Don't take my word for it. And also, like, this is going to be out of date in 3 days.
Yep. But at least they do FBX files. Though, I mean, looking at a lot of things I've seen that have come out in 3D, if I wanted to change something, I would get a free, legal to use 3D model that someone else already created. I mean, especially for quadrupeds. Who the heck wants to create a horse? You grab somebody else's, you modify it a little bit, and you change the textures. And you do that legally. An AI one, I don't know even why I would do that when there's so many good human-generated ones I can use. But again, if I want to do one of my Voroks from Fading Suns with 6 limbs and freakishness, maybe I can train the AI to create it more than having an animator bang their head for weeks.
Yeah, one of the things we've definitely seen is, if you're working with a model trained on humans, it's going to do good with humans.
Right.
And not necessarily things with 6 legs or reverse articulation or anything of the sort.
Great point. I keep saying I'm going to end the conversation with one last question, but Taz Leet has one that I do want to end with, because I disagree with him. He says, I honestly think that AI will be way more beneficial to small developers and larger studios because of the fact it is not as polished as what you get out of it. Oops, sorry, things moved on me. Because it is not as polished as what you get out of it, especially in the near future. And here's the worry about it. Beneficial, I would agree, but the big studios are looking for this in a big way so they can eliminate positions. I would prefer that it be to supplement positions. I mean, render, I talk about animation. I would like good animators to be creating good animations instead of having to do yet another walk cycle with a weird model and wasting weeks trying to make that right. Get the AI to do that, and then they do cool things. But the fear is that the publishers will use it to eliminate positions. So I don't know. Hopefully, I think that everyone will be beneficial if, again, we get it to take care of the drudge work and we do the cool things.
Yeah, and I think, well, the answer I gave to this question the last time I got it was, you and I were both around before Unreal, before Unity,
Right.
when, well, certainly before Unity, where if you wanted to make a game, you were either writing your own engine or you were paying a lot of money to Epic or, Gamebryo, whoever it was. Like, the entry point was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
One thing that we saw with the advent of Unity and Unreal changing their model was all of these projects that would not have been viable before that becoming viable both within the game space and in the game adjacent space. So, for instance, all of the DoD training projects, all of the real estate projects. We've got a company in town that does wedding planning using Unity. There are a lot of other jobs and products which use the technology that we're talking about here that will become viable and overall drive the total size of the market if you kind of change the way you think about what the market is. If it's not just AAA, if it's anything using AI tools and game engines, well, potentially that's a much larger market in a couple of years than it is now.
Absolutely. That's a great note on which to end this, other than the note that Galactic Civilizations 4 is in early access on Steam and Epic.
That's right.
So that's the best note on which to end it. Nathan, really appreciate it. If you do want to get in touch with Nathan, you can reach out to him through me, or if you are in our GGA Discord, you can message him through that. But really appreciate it, Nathan, and we'll be promoting this in the future. So thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity.